My husband looked up from the laptop, his face pale under the warm light of our kitchen island. "Clara," he said, his voice quiet, the kind of quiet that's louder than a shout. "Did you withdraw $50,000 from our home savings account?" I laughed, a real unforced laugh, because it had to be a joke. One of Leo's dry, ridiculous jokes. "Very funny," I said, reaching for my coffee. "Did you spend it all on rare tulip bulbs again?" His eyes didn't crinkle at the corners like they usually did. He just stared at the screen. "I'm not kidding." The coffee cup stopped halfway to my lips. The laughter died in my throat, replaced by a cold, metallic taste. The next day, I found a receipt that didn't lead me to a thief, or a scammer, or a bank error. It led me to a secret my family had buried for 20 years. A secret designed to keep me in a cage I never even knew I was in. And my decision to finally break free would not just burn a bridge. It would salt the earth where it once stood. My life, up until that point, had been intentionally small. And I mean that in the best way possible. I'm Clara, a freelance illustrator. I draw for a living. Children's books, whimsical logos for local bakeries, the occasional pet portrait for a doting owner. It's not glamorous, but it's mine. My husband, Leo, is a landscape architect. He doesn't just design gardens. He builds them with his own 2 hands. He comes home with soil under his fingernails and the scent of cedar and damp earth clinging to him. He's the most solid person I've ever known. Our house is a small, 100-year-old bungalow we bought with every penny we'd saved, nestled in a town where everyone knows the mailman's name. We have a vegetable patch in the back, a sagging front porch swing, and a life built on shared dreams and mutual respect, not on legacy or expectation. This quiet, deliberate life was a rebellion, though I rarely admitted it out loud. I grew up in a world that was the polar opposite. My family, the Devereaux, didn't live in a house. They occupied a modern architectural statement in the city's most exclusive neighborhood. They didn't have jobs. They curated a legacy. At the center of this universe was the Devereaux Gallery, a temple of minimalist decor and brutally expensive contemporary art. And at the center of the gallery was my older sister, Evelyn. Evelyn was perfect. That's the only word for it. Poised, brilliant, ruthless, in a way that people mistook for ambition. She'd taken over the gallery from our parents and quadrupled its revenue. She spoke 3 languages, sat on 4 charity boards, and her hair never had a single strand out of place. She was everything I wasn't. Where she was polished marble, I was reclaimed wood. Where she was a sharp, clean line, I was a soft, smudged watercolor. We loved each other, I suppose, in the way you love a relative you have nothing in common with. But her love always felt conditional, tinged with a faint, persistent disappointment. She saw my life not as a choice, but as a failure to launch. She saw Leo not as my partner, but as my handicap. The $50,000 was our future. It was the new roof fund, the fix the foundation fund, the what if one of us gets sick fund. And most importantly, the start our own small nursery and design studio fund. It was the physical manifestation of 5 years of hard work, late nights, and saying no to fancy vacations. And it was gone. Leo showed me the transaction. a single clean wire transfer to something called Apex Holdings Group. It happened 2 days ago. "I've never heard of them," I whispered, my heart starting to thud against my ribs. "Me neither," Leo said, his hand finding mine across the wooden tabletop. "I've been on the phone with the bank for an hour. They said the transfer was initiated online, past all security protocols. 2-factor authentication to your phone number, Clara." He looked at me, not with accusation, but with profound confusion. I thought maybe you invested it in something without telling me. A surprise." My blood ran cold. "No, Leo. No. I would never." We spent the rest of the night in a state of suspended disbelief, talking in circles, checking our devices, feeling the weight of that missing money pressed down on the roof of our small safe house. The foundation of our shared dream had just been ripped out from under us, and we had no idea why. The silence between Leo and me the next morning was thick with unspoken fear. It wasn't the silence of anger or suspicion, but the shared silence of two people standing on a cliff edge, unsure if they'd been pushed or if the ground had simply given way. The simmering conflict wasn't between us. It was with the ghost that had entered our home and stolen our future. But for me, another conflict was brewing, one that had been on a low boil for years. My relationship with my sister, Evelyn. Her disapproval of my life was a constant low-grade hum in the background of my happiness. It came in the form of backhanded compliments. "Oh, this little house is so cozy," she'd say, her eyes scanning our worn furniture like an anthropologist studying a primitive tribe. "It must be so relaxing to not have to worry about, appearances." Her generosity was a weapon. For my birthday, she'd send a ridiculously expensive designer handbag I would never use, a stark reminder of the world I'd left behind. It would sit in my closet, smelling of expensive leather and judgment. For Christmas, she'd gift Leo a subscription to a financial magazine, a subtle jab at his choice of a less lucrative career. "Just to help you two plan for the future," she'd say with a smile that never reached her eyes. The worst were the job offers. Every few months she'd call. "Clara, darling, I have the most perfect position for you. Assistant curator. You'd be brilliant. It's what you were meant to do." It was never a question. It was a decree. My refusal was always met with a sigh of long-suffering patience, as if I were a child refusing to eat my vegetables. "You're wasting your talent on doodles," she once said, immediately softening it with, "I just want to see you reach your full potential." Her view of Leo was even more damning. She never said she disliked him. That would be too common, too direct. Instead, she'd praise him in ways that undermined him. "He's so wonderfully simple," she'd mused. "It's refreshing." She'd ask him about his work with a tone of detached curiosity, like a biologist asking a frog about its day. The underlying message was always clear. He was a novelty, a phase, a charmingly rustic dalliance before I came to my senses and returned to the fold. To her, our life wasn't a valid choice. It was a temporary detour. And Leo was the roadblock she was determined to clear. This pressure had been building for years, a slow, steady tightening in my chest whenever her name appeared on my phone. I had learned to deflect, to laugh it off, to change the subject. But now, with the catastrophic loss of our savings, Her voice echoed in my head. "Are you sure you're financially secure with him? A man who plays in the dirt for a living?" A seed of doubt, planted long ago, was being watered by this new crisis. I hated myself for it, but the thought flickered. What if she was right? What if Leo wasn't as solid as I believed? The bank had said the transfer was authenticated through my phone. I had no memory of it. It was impossible. But the money was gone. That afternoon, as Leo was on the phone again with the bank's fraud department, I started my own desperate search. I went through our shared files, our emails, searching for any mention of Apex Holdings Group. Nothing. I was about to give up when my hand brushed against a stack of mail on the counter I hadn't sorted yet. Tucked inside a catalog was a folded piece of paper. It was a receipt. A printed confirmation of the wire transfer for $50,000, my heart seized. At the bottom, in the memo line, were 2 words that made no sense. Linden Debt. I'd never heard of it. I Googled Apex Holdings Group. It was a ghost. No real website, just a registration address in a state we'd never been to. It looked like a shell corporation. My hands were shaking. Then my phone buzzed. It was Evelyn. My thumb hovered over the ignore button, but I answered, my voice tight. "Hello? Clara, darling? I was just thinking about you," she said, her voice like honeyed poison. "I heard the most worrying little rumor. Is everything all right with Leo? Financially, I mean." My blood turned to ice. A rumor? How could there be a rumor about something that had just happened? "What are you talking about, Evelyn?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Oh, it's probably nothing," she breezed. "Just a friend of a friend who mentioned he might have some old gambling debts from his university days. You know how these things can catch up with you. I just wanted to make sure you were protected." She was lying. I could feel it. The timing was too perfect, the concern too manufactured. She was planting a story. The seed of doubt she'd been cultivating for years was starting to sprout, and the ground had just been freshly tilled by a $50,000 disaster. The first domino had fallen. A massive, inexplicable financial loss. My sister's perfectly timed, poisonous phone call landed like a second, smaller domino, tapping against the first. She wanted me to believe Leo was a secret gambler, a man with a hidden past who had just raided our future to pay off a ghost. The story was neat, plausible, and utterly devastating. It was designed to shatter my trust in him completely. Any other woman might have confronted him, armed with the receipt and Evelyn's venomous whisper. There would have been screaming, accusations, tears. The cracks in our foundation would have splintered into a chasm. But as I stood there, phone in hand, my own sister's malice echoing in my ear, something else took over. A cold, quiet certainty. It wasn't Leo. This wasn't a gut feeling. It was logic. The Leo I knew, the man who meticulously saved receipts for bags of potting soil and tracked our budget in a shared spreadsheet, was not a secret high-stakes gambler. The man who spent his weekends building raised garden beds for elderly neighbors for free was not the kind of person to vaporize our life savings on a whim. The story didn't fit the man. Therefore, the story was a lie. And if Evelyn was peddling this lie, she wasn't just a concerned sister. She was an active participant. She was the one holding the hammer. My reaction was not to scream, but to go silent. I didn't show Leo the receipt. I didn't mention Evelyn's call. Telling him would only cause him pain, forcing him to defend himself against a phantom accusation. It would be playing Evelyn's game by her rules. Instead, I tucked the receipt into my pocket and made a decision. I would conduct my own investigation. I would become a detective in my own life. My anger, white-hot and pure, was channeled not into an outburst, but into a quiet, methodical resolve. I would find the truth, and I would do it alone. That evening, I told Leo I was feeling overwhelmed and needed to clear my head, that I was going to spend the evening digging into our online accounts and passwords, just in case we'd been hacked. He just nodded, his face etched with worry, and said, "Whatever you need, Clara. We're in this together." The trust in his eyes was a balm and a spur. I waited until he went to bed. Then I went to my small home office, the receipt for Linden debt lying on the desk like a threat. I started with the name, Linden. It meant nothing to me. A tree? A street name? I searched my old emails, my cloud storage, everything. Nothing. Then I expanded my search beyond just my own files. I started digging into the Devereux Gallery's public records. It was a long shot, but Evelyn's call had connected her to this, and the gallery was her kingdom. Hours bled into one another. I combed through business registrations, lists of board members, and archived press releases, and then I found it. It wasn't obvious. It was buried in the footnotes of an annual financial report from 10 years ago. The gallery had acquired a smaller, independent art consultancy firm as part of an expansion. The name of that firm was Linden Arts. My breath caught in my chest. It could be a coincidence, but it felt like the first solid thread. Linden. It wasn't a debt. It was a company. A company my family's gallery owned. But what about the transfer itself? The bank was adamant it had been authenticated with my phone. I racked my brain. When could anyone have had access to my phone and laptop simultaneously? It would have to be someone I trusted completely. My mind flashed to a memory from 3 weeks ago. Evelyn had visited. It was a rare occurrence for her to come all the way out to our town. She'd claimed she was in the area for a meeting. She'd sat right here, in this office, cooing over a new piece I was working on. She'd asked to use my laptop to check an email, and while she was doing that, she'd asked if she could charge her phone using my charger, which was right next to my own phone. For 10 minutes, she had both. My laptop with saved passwords. My phone, which would receive the 2-factor authentication codes. A cold dread washed over me. It was possible. She could have installed a spyware app, cloned a session, anything. She was tech-savvy and meticulous. If anyone could pull off a clean digital heist, it was her. I felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't just a simple transfer. This was a sophisticated, premeditated attack on my life. And the person who launched it had smiled at me and called me darling while she did it. To understand why Evelyn would go to such lengths, you have to understand what happened when I was 21. It wasn't just about sibling rivalry or differing lifestyles. It was about a wound so deep, I'd spent a decade convincing myself it had healed. I was in my final year at one of the country's top art schools, on a full scholarship. I was on fire. I'd moved away from my family's sterile, minimalist aesthetic and found my own voice in bold, chaotic, narrative-driven pieces. I was painting my truth, and for the first time, people were listening. I had been offered a solo gallery show, a huge deal for an undergraduate. It was with a small but very respected gallery, Linden Arts. The owner, a man named Mr. Alistair Finch, had seen my portfolio and believed in me. This show was my launch pad. It was everything. 2 weeks before the opening, it all fell apart. I received a certified letter from a major corporate client whose branding I had supposedly plagiarized in one of my key pieces. It was a ridiculous accusation. The piece was deeply personal, based on my own childhood memories. But the letter was real, threatening legal action that would ruin me. The same day, Mr. Finch from Linden Arts called me, his voice full of regret. He said he'd received an anonymous tip about the plagiarism claim, and he couldn't risk his gallery's reputation. He was pulling the show. He was apologetic, but firm. The floor gave out beneath me. Then my scholarship committee contacted me. News of the scandal had reached them. My funding was suspended pending an investigation. In the space of 48 hours, my entire future had been dismantled. I was humiliated, terrified, and broke. I spiraled. I stopped painting. I couldn't even look at a canvas without feeling a wave of shame and failure. I called my parents, sobbing, and they were sympathetic but useless. Oh dear. Well, perhaps fine art is too cutthroat, my mother had said. But Evelyn swooped in like a Valkyrie. She was magnificent. She hired a lawyer who made the plagiarism claim disappear with a few threatening letters of his own. She negotiated with Linden Arts, though the show remained cancelled. She told me she'd paid a settlement to the corporate client out of her own pocket to make it all go away. She presented it as an act of selfless love. "Don't worry, little sister," she'd said, wrapping an arm around me. "I'll take care of you." She did. She got me a quiet, safe entry-level graphic design job at a firm one of her friends owned. The work was soul-crushing. Corporate logos and bland website banners, but it was a paycheck. It was secure. I was so broken and so grateful that I didn't question any of it. I accepted that I wasn't cut out for the high-stakes art world. I was fragile. I needed protecting. Evelyn had saved me. I abandoned my dream of being a painter and retreated into the safer world of commercial illustration. That single event became the defining narrative of our relationship. I was the chaotic artist who'd almost flown too close to the sun. She was the capable, grounded sister who had rescued me from my own hubris. I owed her. That sense of indebtedness had been a shadow over me for years. It was the reason I let her veiled insults slide. The reason I accepted her controlling help. Because deep down, I believed I would be nothing without her. She had saved my life. Except, as I sat there in my office, the name Linden glowing on the screen, a horrifying new possibility began to take shape. What if she hadn't saved me? What if she had been the one who pushed me in the first place? The pieces were scattered across my desk and my mind, a jigsaw puzzle from hell. Linden Arts, the gallery that had cancelled my show. Linden debt, the memo on the $50,000 transfer. The fact that the Devereux Gallery had later acquired Linden Arts. Evelyn's visit 3 weeks ago, where she had access to my devices. Her perfectly timed call about Leo's gambling problem. It wasn't a series of unfortunate events. It was a pattern. A meticulously crafted campaign of sabotage stretching back a decade. The rage I felt was so cold and clear, it was almost serene. I wasn't just angry that she'd stolen our money. I was furious that she had stolen my past, my confidence, my belief in myself. The story I told myself for 10 years, that I was weak, that I had failed, was a lie she had written. I needed proof. One final undeniable piece. I focused on the plagiarism claim from all those years ago. The corporate client was a mid-level tech company. I found their old press releases from that year. And there it was. A new product launch, announced 2 months after my supposed plagiarism. The branding they eventually used looked nothing like my artwork. But the damning part was a name listed on the press release as a consultant for their new brand identity. Evelyn Devereaux, my sister. She hadn't defended me from a plagiarism claim. She had orchestrated it. She had likely approached them, showed them my work under the guise of a proposal, and then manufactured the entire conflict to destroy my solo show. And then she had bought the silence of the gallery that betrayed me. Linden Arts wasn't just a casualty. It was a reward for her henchmen. That was it. The final key turned in the lock. I stood up from my desk, my legs unsteady. I walked into the living room, where the first light of dawn was filtering through the windows. Leo was asleep on the couch, having waited up for me. His face, even in sleep, was lined with worry. My protector, my solid ground. And my family had tried to turn him into the villain of a story they wrote for me. I felt a surge of love for him so fierce, it almost buckled my knees. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about us. I knew what I had to do. There would be no more quiet deflection, no more polite disagreements. It was time for a confrontation. Not a shouting match, but an execution. I drove to the city that morning. I didn't call ahead. I walked into the Devereaux Gallery like I owned the place. The air was cool and smelled of expensive cleaning products and money. A cheekily dressed assistant at the front desk tried to stop me. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see my sister," I said, not breaking my stride as I walked toward Evelyn's glass-walled office at the back. I pushed the door open without knocking. Evelyn was on the phone, her back to me, looking out at the city skyline. She was wearing a cream-colored silk blouse that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. She ended the call and turned, a perfectly curated look of surprise on her face. "Clara, what a surprise. You should have called." "No," I said, my voice unnervingly calm. "I don't think I should have." I walked to her massive marble desk and placed the printed receipt for the $50,000 transfer in the center of it. I didn't say a word. I just waited. She glanced at it, her expression unreadable. "What is this?" "It's a receipt for the money you stole from me and my husband," I said. A flicker of something, annoyance, fear, crossed her face before being smoothed over. "That's a serious accusation, Clara. Are you feeling all right? Maybe the stress of your financial situation is getting to you." The condescension, the gaslighting. It was so familiar. But this time, it didn't work. "My financial situation?" I repeated, my voice dangerously soft. "You mean the one you created? Or the one you tried to create 10 years ago?" I laid a second piece of paper on the desk next to the first, the press release with her name listed as a consultant for the company that had falsely accused me of plagiarism. Her mask didn't just crack, it shattered. For a split second, I saw the real Evelyn. Panicked, cornered, furious. Her composure vanished. "You have no idea what you're talking about," she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "Oh, I think I do," I said, leaning forward, my hands flat on her perfect desk. "Let's review. 10 years ago, you couldn't stand that I was getting a solo show before you'd even managed to get one of your pet artists recognized. So, you engineered a plagiarism scandal to ruin me. You destroyed my confidence, my career, my spirit. And then you played the hero, swooping in to save your broken little sister." She stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. "I did it to protect you. You were naive. You would have been eaten alive in that world. I gave you a safe, stable life. You gave me a cage," I shot back, my voice finally rising. "You needed me to be weak so you could be strong. You needed me to be a failure so you could be the success. I was your project, your pet reclamation project." We stared at each other across the desk, the truth finally laid bare between us. "And now," I continued, my voice dropping back to that icy calm, "you see that I'm happy, genuinely happy, with a good man, in a life I built myself, far away from you. And you can't stand it. It invalidates your entire narrative. If I can be happy without you, then you never saved me. You only controlled me. So you decided to burn it all down again. Steal our savings and frame my husband, hoping I'd come running back to you, broken and grateful, just like last time." Her face was white with fury. "He's not good enough for you, Clara. He's a nobody. You're a Devereaux. You're meant for more than dirt and mediocrity. That nobody is a better person than you will ever be," I said, straightening up. "He builds things. You only know how to break them." I looked around the sterile, perfect office, at the woman who had been both my sister and my jailer. "It's over, Evelyn. The money is gone. Consider it a severance package, the price of my freedom. I want nothing from you. Not an apology, not an explanation. I just wanted you to know that I know." I turned and walked toward the door. "Clara, wait!" she called out, her voice laced with desperation. "You can't just walk away. We're family." I paused at the door and looked back at her. "No, Evelyn," I said. "We're not. Not anymore." And I walked out, leaving her alone in her beautiful, empty kingdom. The drive home was a blur. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt empty. The anger had burned itself out, leaving behind a hollow ache. When I walked through my front door, Leo was there, pacing in the living room. He stopped when he saw me. "Where have you been? I was so worried." I didn't say anything. I just walked over to him and handed him the 2 pieces of paper, the receipt and the press release. He read them, his brow furrowed in confusion, and then his eyes widened as he put the pieces together. He looked from the papers to my face, and I saw the exact moment understanding dawned. He didn't ask questions. He just wrapped his arms around me and held me as I finally broke down and cried. I cried for the 21-year-old girl whose dream had been stolen. I cried for the decade I'd spent believing I was less than I was. And I cried with relief, because I was finally free. The consequences of that day rippled outwards, swift and irreversible. the $50,000 was gone for good. Pursuing it legally would mean a public, messy battle against my own family, dragging Leo through the mud and forcing me to relive every painful detail. We made a decision together. We let it go. We called it the most expensive therapy session we'd ever had. The price we paid to surgically remove a cancer from our lives. It meant our dream of starting our own nursery was pushed back, maybe indefinitely. It meant months of scrambling, of taking on extra work, of eating cheap and living leaner than ever before. It was hard. But our little house, once shadowed by that financial loss, now felt lighter. We weren't just a couple anymore. We were a team that had weathered a hurricane. Our foundation, which Evelyn had tried to shatter, was now forged in steel. I called my parents that evening. I told them everything, calmly and factually. I expected shock, anger on my behalf, some semblance of parental protection. Instead, I was met with a chilling, defensive silence. It was my mother who spoke first. "Clara, are you sure you're not misunderstanding? Evelyn has always had your best interests at heart." My father chimed in. "She was just trying to protect the family name. Your lifestyle. It doesn't always reflect well on us." They knew. Maybe they didn't know the specifics, but they knew Evelyn's character. They knew her methods. And in the choice between their two daughters, the perfect, successful one who upheld their legacy, and the quiet, rebellious one who had walked away, they chose her. They would always choose her. "She admitted it to me," I said, my voice flat. There was another pause. "Well," my mother said, her voice dripping with disappointment, "sometimes family has to make difficult choices for one another." That was it. That was the moment I realized I hadn't just lost a sister. I had lost my entire family. "Okay," I said. "I understand." I hung up the phone and blocked their numbers. Then I blocked Evelyn. I scrubbed my life clean of them. It was a quiet digital amputation. No drama, no final tearful goodbyes. Just silence. It's been a year now. Life is different. Financially, we're still recovering. We had to take out a small loan to fix the roof before the winter rains came. The dream of the nursery is still just a sketch in a notebook. But in every other way, we are richer. The constant low-grade anxiety that used to hum beneath the surface of my life is gone. I don't second-guess my choices anymore. I don't flinch when the phone rings. I'm breathing air that feels fully my own. I started painting again. Not for a gallery, not for a client, but for me. Big, messy, emotional canvases that fill our small living room with color. Leo built me an easel from reclaimed oak. He says my art has never been more alive. He was right. It was my soul finally uncaged. The most profound lesson in all of this was not about the poison of jealousy or the depths of familial betrayal. It was about the definition of success. My family's version of success was a glittering cold thing, measured in dollars, accolades, and public perception. It was a performance. My version of success is quiet. It's the feeling of the sun on my face in our garden. It's the smell of Leo's sawdust-covered shirt when he comes home. It's the satisfaction of creating something honest and true, even if only two people ever see it. I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from the people who are incapable of loving the person you actually are. You cannot force someone to see your worth if they are determined to measure you by their own broken ruler. Family isn't always the one you're born into. Sometimes it's the one you build. It's the person who holds you when you shatter and helps you glue the pieces back together, not the people who hand you the hammer. I lost a sister and my parents, but I solidified my partnership with my husband, and more importantly, I reclaimed myself. I look at my life now, this small, intentionally beautiful life, and I don't see mediocrity. I see freedom. I see peace. I see a masterpiece I painted myself. So that's my story. The $50,000 lie that ultimately set me free. It makes me wonder how many of us are living in cages we don't even see, built by the people who claim to love us the most. Have you ever had to break free from a golden cage? Have you ever had to choose between your family and your own sanity? It's a lonely road, but I promise you, what's on the other side is worth the journey. Let me know your story in the comments below. It's important we know we're not alone. And if you're still here, thank you for listening.